So I'm going to go ahead and launch VS Code. And I have mine down here. I've got it pinned to the taskbar. You could also click here to search. And you could key in VS Code here as well. And you can launch it this way. For applications that I use a lot, I tend to pin them because it's just easier to get into them that way. I will probably show you some type of welcome. I did change the color theme. I tend to like a lighter background. So that's totally personal preference. You can click on that. You can pick whatever color scheme you like. I'm going to go ahead and close this welcome. And I am going to open that CIT 180 folder just so I can kind of connect everything to that. And you'll notice that lesson 2 is showing with nothing in it. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a new file. And at this point, I am ready to start entering my tags. And these tags are in the book. We're going to be keying in listing 211. And the biggest mistake that beginners make primarily are typos, and they forget to enter opening and closing tags. And VS Code will try to help you out a little bit because it will enter the closing tags for you. But we're going to start with doc type, HTML. And this tells the web browser that it is an HTML5 document. Then we're also saying that this is HTML and we are using English for our language. And then we've got a little head section. And I can see it did not enter the closing tag, so I'm going to throw that in there. Yours may, depending on what your settings are. And I believe if I save this as an HTML, it should start entering all those tags properly. So I'm going to go ahead and go to File and Save As. And I am going to call this Bottom Navigation. And I'm going to tell it that this is an HTML file. And then I'm going to open up lesson 2 and save it right into that folder. And you'll notice the minute that I've saved it as an HTML file, it looks a little bit different. You'll notice that things are a little color-coded. Now the color coding is going to vary depending on the color theme that you have selected. So yours may look different than mine, and that is okay. So between my opening and closing heading tags, I'm going to go ahead and enter a title tag. And you'll notice that once you have saved it as an HTML file, it does add the closing tag for you. So right in between the opening and closing, I'm going to enter the text they want. And I'll click at the end here and press enter. Another thing it should do for you once you tell it that you're working on an HTML file is it should do indentation for you. And the indentation is not anything that the web browser requires, but it does make your page, your code, easier to read. Whoops, got to put the right UTF in there. And these meta tags are just providing some additional information for the web browser. This universal character set that we are using, a description that we want for this page if it shows up in a search. And let's see, we have another one with keywords. So these would be the keywords that if you do a search and you type in these keywords, it should pull up this page. And we'll be learning more about these meta tags later in the course. So one thing you need to be careful of is the double quotes. They kind of need to match up. So if you have an opening double quote, you should also have closing double quotes. Spacing in here doesn't really matter as much. You do have to have at least one space between, your keywords and your content, but additional spaces tend to be ignored. And we really aren't getting into CSS yet, but this is just good practice to key this in. We do not have a My Style CSS page yet, so it's not going to be applying any CSS to our little page that we are creating. And that is pretty much everything that's in the head. So in this little head section, the title that you see is what is going to display in the web browser on the tab. Okay, and then all of these meta tags are just an additional information to the web browser. It's telling it that we're using a universal character set. I can see I have a little typo there. It's also giving it keywords. So if they key in these words, the page should be flagged and display. And the description is when you have done a search and you have a link, typically there's a description below the link, and that's what this is referring to. And then this link tag is basically specifying a style sheet which does not exist. So it's not going to apply any styles, okay? But you won't get an error. It just is pretty much going to ignore it because there's nothing there. Nothing in the head section displays in the actual web page itself. What you put in the body section does display in the page. So anything between the opening and closing body tags is what actually goes into the page. And typically you will have a header. This is normally at the top, and this is where you would put your title. You'd also have a navigation section with links. Nav sections can be at the top or the bottom. They can also be on the side of a page. And so we're just kind of setting this up. These aren't actually links yet. And to get this little separator line, I'm pressing Shift, and it is below the backspace key on your keyboard. And then below my closing body, I should have a closing HTML. And that pretty much completes the page. So what you really need to check for is kind of matching opening and closing tags. And you can see when I click on them how it highlights. So it's showing me where the opening and closing tags are. Okay, so you want to check for that and kind of make sure you don't have typos. Those are typical beginner mistakes. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. And then the next video is going to show you how to view this page offline in a web browser.